Dr. Elias Mercer stood in the dimly lit laboratory, his fingers trembling as he entered the final sequence into the console. The air smelled sterile, a faint trace of antiseptic clinging to the cold metal walls of the research station. He had spent the last 5 years working in secret, driven by an obsession that no one else could understand. To others, the Xenomorphs were mindless killing machines, an apex predator with no purpose beyond survival. But to Mercer, they were something more, an enigma, a biological masterpiece that had the potential to evolve beyond its primitive instincts. His project, codenamed Prometheus, had been a reckless gamble. He had isolated a single xenomorph embryo, modifying its genetic structure to introduce human neuroreceptors. The goal was to create a bridge between their species, to see if intelligence, true intelligence, could be sparked within the monster's mind. His superiors at Weyland-Yutani had no knowledge of his private experiments. If they did, he'd already be dead. The containment chamber before him hummed with power, a thick glass wall separating him from his creation. Inside, the creature stirred. It was unlike any xenomorph he had ever seen. Taller, leaner, its exoskeleton shimmered with an almost unnatural smoothness. Its elongated head bore a slight ridging that hadn't existed in its predecessors, and its secondary jaws remained withdrawn, as if waiting. But what disturbed Mercer most were its eyes. Normal xenomorphs had none. This one, however, had small, deep-set slits, faint, yet unmistakable. It was watching him. "Can you hear me?" Mercer whispered, pressing a gloved hand to the glass. His voice was barely audible over the hum of machinery. He didn't expect an answer. He never had. But today something was different. The xenomorph cocked its head. Mercer felt his stomach drop. It was responding to stimuli in a way no other specimen ever had. He reached for the neural interface on the console, the device linked to the implants he had carefully embedded in the creature's cerebral cortex. A pulse of static ran across the screen. Then, a word, fragmented, barely formed, flashed across the display. "Why?" His breath hitched. It wasn't an automatic response. It wasn't an error. The creature had formed the thought on its own. Mercer swallowed hard, his mind racing. He typed his reply with shaking fingers. "To understand." The xenomorph's lips curled slightly, almost like a smirk. It tapped the glass lightly with a claw, the sound sending shivers down Mercer's spine. Understand what? He had created something new, something terrifying. And in that moment, for the first time in his career, Dr. Elias Mercer truly questioned whether he had made a discovery or a mistake. Days passed, each one a descent further into the unknown. The creature, whom Mercer had begun calling Subject Theta, continued to learn at an accelerated rate. It communicated through the neural interface in fragmented sentences, growing more articulate by the hour. What disturbed Mercer most was not its intelligence, but its curiosity. It asked about him, about humans, about the world outside its containment. The questions carried an almost childlike wonder, yet there was an edge to them, a lurking menace beneath their innocence. Late one night, Mercer sat before the console, exhausted. His research logs had grown thick with data, and still the question gnawed at him, what does it want? A new message flickered onto the screen. What am I? Mercer hesitated. Honesty could be dangerous, but deception? Even worse. He typed carefully. You are an experiment. Possibility. The response came instantly. I am wrong? His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The weight of his answer settled on his conscience. No, you are different. That does not mean wrong. The xenomorph pressed a claw against the glass, its gaze intense. Then, for the first time, it spoke. Not through the interface, but aloud. The sound was guttural, inhuman, yet unmistakably structured. Show me. A chill ran down Mercer's spine. He had unlocked something that should have remained buried. The question was, could he control it? As the days turned into weeks, Subject Theta's growth defied all expectations. It could comprehend speech, mimic sounds, and, most disturbingly, predict Mercer's actions before he made them. It was no longer just a subject. It was a presence. And Mercer wasn't sure who was studying whom. One evening, while reviewing security footage, Mercer noticed something alarming. The other xenomorph specimens in the station's lower containment levels had begun behaving erratically. They were restless, pacing, clawing at their enclosures. Theta had never been in contact with them, yet they were reacting. It was as if they could sense its existence. Theta's voice, still rasping yet eerily refined, broke the silence behind him. "They feel me." Mercer turned, heart pounding. The creature stood at the glass, its claws tracing slow, deliberate circles against the surface. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "They know I am different." Mercer swallowed, his mouth dry. "And what do they think of that?" Theta tilted its head, those unnatural eyes locking onto Mercer's. "They fear it." A sudden realization settled over Mercer like a suffocating weight. Theta wasn't just evolving. It was changing the hierarchy of its species, and the others didn't know whether to revere it or destroy it. The outbreak happened 3 days later. The lower containment levels failed simultaneously. Security alerts blared as the facility descended into chaos. Mercer barely made it to the control room before the screams began. Theta remained in its enclosure, watching through the monitors as the station fell apart. Didn't move, didn't react. Then, as if sensing Mercer's gaze, it turned toward the camera. "Now you understand." Mercer's hands trembled over the emergency protocols. He could still stop this. He could vent the station, purge the infestation. But then what? Theta would remain. Would the company let him keep it alive? Would he even want to? He took a breath, staring into the creature's unblinking eyes. The xenomorphs outside were mindless, driven only by instinct. Theta was different, smarter, stronger, something new. "What will you do?" Mercer typed, his last question, his last hope. The reply was instantaneous. "Survive."